creates a writer? Is it talent or education, or is it something deeper, something that cannot be easily explained? Because when we look at Xuemo's literary path, we begin to realize that his writing is not just about storytelling. It is rooted in experience, it is shaped by environment, and more importantly, it is driven by a kind of inner necessity. Not something he chose casually, but something he could not avoid. So if we really want to understand his works, we need to go back to the beginning, not the books, but the life behind the books. So in 1963, in a remote village in Gansu, China, here I am, on the edge of the desert, Xuemo was born. He was not born into privilege. He was not surrounded by books or intellectual circles. He grew up in a farming family in a time of scarcity, in a place where survival was the first priority. Now, this is important because most of people from that background would follow a very predictable life path: work, survive, repeat. But something different happened here. From very early age, there was already a divergency, not obvious at first, but real, a different sensitivity, a different way of seeing the world, and eventually a different path. In his autobiographical work, One Man's West, he looks back at this period of life with clarity and calmness, not romanticizing it, not exaggerating it, but simply observing it. And what we see is this: the environment was harsh, the conditions were limited, but the inner world was quietly expanding. So this brings us to the first key idea. The beginning of a literary path is not a decision, it is a seed shaped by both genetics and dreams. So, hi, Ghana, hello. So many new friends here. Please subscribe to our channel. I'm talking about the story behind Xuemo. Xuemo is now already have the international recognition, and what makes him a great writer. And and he's not just only made him not only just a storyteller, but also um, he's like the life guide of many readers because his books always illuminate people's inner light. So please subscribe to our channel, and you're in a place of self-growth, inner peace. So now let's look at what this seed actually looked like in real life. As a child, Xuemo grew up in poverty, but poverty did not take away his imagination. In fact, it may have protected it. Because when material life is limited, the inner world often becomes richer. He spent long hours herding livestock for his family in the open land of the desert with no distractions, no noise, no constant stimulation, just space and time. And in that space, something very important was quietly forming. His imagination began to grow freely, not guided, not shaped by systems, but naturally unfolding. At the same time, there was another. Hi, Yara, hello. He literally said, hi. Yeah. So at the same time, there was another quality developing in him, a kind of clarity, like the sky above the desert, clear, open, unobstructed, and also a stillness, like a lake without the waves, calm, undisturbed. And this is not something that can be trained easily. It comes from environment, from within, rhythm, from long periods of being alone with oneself. Another important detail is memory. He has a very strong memory. Things he experienced stayed with him. Hi, Karthik again. Hello to the new friends here. Thank you for your time being here. And we are mainly about the spiritual wisdom and human warmth found in the works by the Chinese writer Mr. Xuemo. And today we are talking about Xuemo's story and what makes him his literary path and what makes he well-known writer and the story behind him, the story from his childhood. So Xuemo had a very strong memory. Things he experienced stayed with him, not just as facts, but as impressions, as feelings, as image. And this kind of memory is essential for writer because writing is not just about thinking, it is also about remembering and transforming what is remembered into meaning. And from an early age, he already had a kind of awareness, a sense of what he needed. Even if he could not fully explain it, he knew he was looking for something but beyond daily survival. And alongside that, there was a deep attraction to folk culture, to stories, and to books. Now, here is the key contract. He grew up in a village where books were extremely rare. In fact, the entire village might not even have a single book available. So, if you think about it, the idea of becoming a writer in that kind of environment almost sounds impossible. Hi, Sabiko. Hello, welcome. I know what this channel is about. It's yours. Hi. So I'm talking about the story from the childhood of Xuemo. So for most people, it wouldn't be an option, but for him, it was not just a possibility, it became inevitable. Because once the seed is there, once the inner drive is there, external limitations cannot fully stop it. They may slow it down, they may shape its form, but they cannot erase it. As a teenager, he began to actively collect writing materials, observation, stories, fragments of life, anything that could be turned into writing. And later in high school, he became deeply absorbed in literature, especially classical works like Dream of the Red Chamber. Anyone have read 红楼梦, the classic literature in China? Hello, now it is early morning in China, not. Hi, I already left London after being there for over 20 days, and now I'm in Xuemo Academy in Western China. And today we are sharing the story behind Xuemo. Will this look better? Hi, glad to see both the new friends and old friends here. For the new friends, please subscribe to our channel. And So anyone have read Hong Long Meng, Dream of the Red Chamber? Hi, Anita. Glad to see our old friend here. And in high school, Xuemo became deeply absorbed in literature, especially classic works, reading not casually but intensely, almost obsessively. Yes, I remember all of the friends here. What time does Wendy do live? Oh, I don't remember. Hi, hello, welcome. Thank you for your time being here. So when we look back at this path, we begin to understand something clearly. His becoming a writer was not an accident. It was not, it was a convergence of environment, of personality, sensitivity, and something deeper that we might call destiny. And at the very beginning of this path, there were no mentors, no structured guidance, no abundance of books. What he had was something much more fundamental, a seed buried in the soil. Hi, thank you. Thank you for your message here. So, welcome to our channel. Please subscribe to our channel. And not everything about his childhood fit the typical expectation. Although he was born into a farming family, he was not well suited for farm labor. He could not stay long under the sun. If he did, he would feel dizzy, sometimes even get nosebleeds. So while others worked in the fields, he often could not continue. And because of that, people in the village gave him a nickname. They call him lazy. Not because he refused to work, but because he simply couldn't adapt to that kind of life. But here is the turning point. What looked like a weakness on the surface was actually redirecting his life. Because instead of working in the fields, he turned to something else, reading. Hi to all the old friends here. Thanks for your time and your talking here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it because time is precious. So from a very early age, he realized something clearly. He didn't want to live the same life as his parents. He didn't want to spend his entire life just staying with the land, working for survival, raising children, and repeating the same cycle. He wanted something different, not necessarily easier, but more meaningful. And in his mind, there was only one path that could, could lead him there, reading. He once said something very direct. I deeply understood that reading was my only way out. So during his school years, reading took up most of his time. He rarely thought about anything else. Even the distractions that many teenagers have barely affect him. And there is another detail that matters. He did not come from a wealthy background, so buying books was not easy, but he still found a way. He saved money from his food allowance. Sometimes he did not eat enough, but he bought books. There is a sentence that captures this very well. I would rather let my body go hungry than let my soul starve. And this is where 宁愿饿着肚子，也不愿饿着灵魂. I would rather let my body go hungry than let my soul starve. And this is where we see something important. For him, reading is not entertainment. It was not a hobby. It was survival, not physical survival, but inner survival. So that is what the why what makes him different from the smoking, the reading. It means different for him than us. So when I'm reading, it was like my favorite hobby, but for him, it is the inner survival. So because of that, he gave more than most people, and he also received more later in life, even after he had already achieved his goals. He no longer needed reading to change his destiny. He still continued, because by that point, reading had already become something else. It was no longer a tool, it was part of his life. Alongside writing and spiritual practice, it became one of the three essential dimensions of his life. And perhaps the most interesting detail is this: reading gave him visible energy. People around him noticed it. After reading for a while, his face would look brighter and his energy would rise almost immediately. Hi, if you're new here, please subscribe our channel. Today we are sharing the Xuemo's childhood and what makes him a writer. So for Mr. Xuemo, reading was not just input, it was nourishment, a form of restoration, a way to reconnect with something deeper. And when you look at all of this together, you begin to see the pattern clearly. What looked like limitation became direction. What looked like disadvantage became focus. And what looked like isolation became depth. And then came a turning point. At the age of 17, life presented him with his first major challenge, the college ex- entrance examination, and he did not succeed. Now, for many people, this will be the end of story, especially coming from his background. A failed exam often means returning to the land, returning to the same life, but something unexpected happened. Another opportunity appeared. He was admitted to a secondary normal school, and this changed everything. Because from that moment on, he was no longer bound to the path of a farmer, not because he looked down on that life, but because he understood something clearly. If he stayed in that life, he would not have the freedom to read. He would not have the space to write. He once explained this very directly. It, it's not that I looked down on farmers, but once you become one, you are trapped in endless labor. And then you lose the chance to read and write. So here's something worth noticing. He saw people around him. Some of them were intelligent, some even had talent. But under the pressure of survival, that sensitivity faded. That creativity disappeared because of because constant labor consumes not just the body but also the soul. Hi, thanks for your question. So, what is the book Eternal Love, which is behind your about? Okay, Eternal Love, it is actually about the end of life companionship. End of life companion, Eternal Love. Are you still there? I'm going to introduce this book for you if you're still there. So, Xuemo saw something deeper. The land itself had culture, it had spirit, it had stories, but at the same time, poverty and hardship could slowly erase that spirit. So many people had no choice. They gave up their dreams, not because they wanted to, but because they had to survive. Okay, about eternal love. Eternal Love is a deeply moving novel about end of life companionship. Through 34 letters exchanged, it recreates the heartfelt dialogues between tongue cancer patient Yato and her mentor Guru Xue. In the form of letters and diaries, she confides in him, revealing her struggles and moments of awakening as she faces the greatest challenge of her life. Under Guru Xue's compassionate care and spiritual guidance, she courageously confronts her illness, refuses to surrender to fear and despair, and ultimately finds her self redemption. So, this is the book Eternal Love, and it is available on Amazon and also on our online shop, shop.xuemo.com. So, in his at a very young age, Mr. Xuemo understands his parents. He understands the older generation, also understood the hardship of their life, but at the same time, he made a decision. He would not stay in that cycle. And yet, his relationship with that land was not rejection, it was complex. He both loved it and resisted it because he knew something. If he wanted to truly express that land, he could not remain trapped inside it. He needed this the distance, he needed perspective, and most importantly, he needed language. Only by writing could he give voice to that world. Only by writing could he bring the lives of those people, their struggles, their dignity, their suffering, and their quiet strength into the sight of the world. And this was not just ambition, it was responsibility. So, as a young man, he already knew his direction, not clearly in detail, but unmistakable in essence. He would write, and through writing, he would carry that land into the world. And years later, he fulfilled that vision through works like Desert Rights, White Tank Pass, and Desert Hunters. His early dream became reality. So we can see something clearly. His path was not accidental, it was shaped by pressure. Okay, Thank you for all your messages here. Thank you. So, Xuemo's path was not accidental. It was shaped by pressure and by limitation and by a very clear inner decision. But this raises another question. Even if someone has determination, even if they have direction, how do they actually become a writer? Because desire alone is not enough, hardship alone is not enough, even talent is not enough. There must be a process of formation. So the next I'm going to share is literary formation. So after entering the normal school in Wei, his environment changed. For the first time, he met he had access to a real library, and this is very important. Before that, books were rare, almost inaccessible for him. But now books became available regularly. Every week, he could borrow books from the library. And what did he choose to read? Mostly novels, and not casually. He read intensely, rapidly, in large quantities. He described it in a very small way. I devoured books. Now, this is interesting because today many people emphasize careful reading, deep analysis, taking notes, but his early age was different. He read broadly first, he absorbed without overthinking, and later he reflected on this. He said something very important. The purpose of reading is not necessarily to remember everything. Instead, reading does something else first. It shows you that another world exists, a different way of living, a different way of thinking, a different way of seeing reality. And this is the real beginning. Because before that, the world is limited by the environment. Once you start reading, your world expands. And for him, this expansion was dramatic because the world he saw in books was completely different from the one he grew up in. And this difference opened something inside him, not just knowledge, but perception. He began to know writers, not personally, but through their works. Names like Yu Hua, Su Tong, and many others. And whenever a translated work was available, he would read it, almost everything he could find. So at that time, he did not yet appreciate certain writers. For example, he did not like Tolstoy at first. He found the writing slow, difficult to enter, but interestingly, he could read Gorky more easily. So even in reading, there are stages. At first, you choose what you can enter, but later, your ability changes. Your perception deepens, and then you begin to understand things you could not understand before. And he said that it was only after the age of 30 that he truly understood what makes a great writer. Hello, if you are new here, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much. So what makes a great writer? It is not technique, it is not style, it is something deeper, um, like vision and the breadth of mind. And when he finally understood Tolstoy, he did not just appreciate him, he loved him, a deep kind of love, not intellectual but almost spiritual, a kind of resonance. And this leads to a very powerful idea. To truly understand a great writer, you need you need qualification, not external qualification, but inner qualification. Qualification, qualification. Your depth, your openness, your life experience, all these determine what you can understand and what remains close to you. And as his reading expanded his world, he did not stop at simply consuming books, but gradually began to train himself consciously in writing. He started keeping a diary, not just to record events, but to capture observations, collect raw material, and practice how to describe people, situations, conversations, and even inner psychological state. In many ways, the imagination he once developed while herding livestock in the desert continued here, but now it became more structured, more deliberate, and more refined. The path into literature did not appear suddenly, it unfolded quietly, day by day, through these seemingly simple daily practices. Writing a diary for him was never a causal habit, it became a lifelong discipline that he maintained even into later years. And beyond improving writing skills, the diary became something deeper, a space where he examined himself, questioned his own behavior, and confronted his thoughts with honesty. It was, in a sense, a private room for the soul, a place for self reflection, for regret, and for correction. So, thank you for your time, all the friends here, and for the new friends here, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much. So Mr. Xuemo once described this very vividly during his time in school. Whenever he watched a movie and felt he had wasted time, he would return to his diary and write long passages criticizing himself, reminding himself not to repeat the same mistake again. Now, this is important because what we see here is not just a discipline, but a method of self development. He treated self reflection as a core practice, and over time, this continuous self examination became one of the main sources of his growth. But his training was not only intellectual, at the same time, he also was training his body with equal intensity. Every day he practiced martial arts, he lifted heavy dumbbells repeatedly, trained different kicking techniques, and spent long hours practicing traditional exercises like the Yi Jing Jing. Well, Yi Jing Jing. So this was not occasional effort, it was consistent, daily, and this again was not random. So from a very young age, he already understood something very practical. If a person does not have strong body and a stable mind, there are many things he simply cannot do. He saw clearly that physical weakness limits life choices, and if someone is constantly ill or fragile, their capacity to pursue anything meaningful becomes very limited. So for him, training the body was not separate from his literary path. It was part of it. Because he knew that his goal was not small, he had a clear sense of direction, and to sustain that path, he needed strength. Not just mental strength, but physical endurance. He once described his routine very simply. He would wake up early, practice meditation, then go to the training ground, lift heavy weights hundreds of times, and continue with martial arts practice. It was exhausting, but he continued. Because as he said, he knew very clearly what he wanted to do in his life. And that clarity became his driving force. And to support that vision, he needed a strong body. And if we look at his training more closely, we begin to realize that what supported everything was not just effort, but a very strong and consistent will. From a young age, he remained active, disciplined, and forward moving, never allowing himself to sink into pass- passivity or resignation, even later when he encountered real setbacks in life. He described this in a very interesting way, saying that no matter what kind of a dream or inner state he was in, he always had the confidence that he could defeat others. And that other was not only external opponents, but also the imperfect version of himself that he constantly struggled against. At the same time, his martial arts training was not symbolic, it was real, physical, and deeply developed. By the age of 19, he had already demonstrated abilities that surprised people around him, even handling local troublemakers with ease and gaining their respect without needing to prove much. He once described this physical condition during that period in vivid detail. After years of practicing iron palm techniques and internal training methods like the Yi Jing Jing, he developed a level of control and strength that allowed him to break hard walnuts with a simple strike, withstand heavy blows to his body, and even use his limb to strike steel rods without injury. He could also easily climb over walls using only finger strength. And before the age of 25, these abilities had already earned him a certain level of recognition in this environment. But this is not the most important part. What truly matters is that during these same years, another dimension of his life was quietly unfolding. He formally began practicing meditation under the guidance of a master from Liangzhou Songtao Temple. He entered into the discipline of inner cultivation. But in fact, his connection to this kind of practice began even earlier. From a young age, he had already been exposed to Taoist practices such as stillness, breathing, and internal awareness. And what is remarkable is that he had a natural affinity for it. He could understand quickly, he could apply it, and gradually he discovered something profound. There is a deep connection between learning and inner cultivation. When he maintained his meditation practice, His ability to study improved. His mind became clearer. His focus became stronger. But when he stopped practicing, his mental state would immediately decline. So for him, meditation was not abstract, it was practical. It became one of the most important forces in shaping his destiny. Because through his practice, he learned how to let go of distractions. He learned how to focus on what truly matters. And eventually, he came to a very simple but powerful conclusion. In his life, he was essentially doing one thing to refine himself, and the methods were also simple: meditation, reading, writing, and over time, these three were no longer separate activities. Reading and writing became part of his meditation or self-cultivation. So his entire life became a continuous process of cultivation. So this is the story of Xuemo and how he what makes him became a well-known writer. And so this is my first session. Because of internet, the connection of the internet, I have to close this live session and then reopen again. Otherwise, it will shut down.